introduce our guest speaker tonight. Longtime friend, longtime Toastmaster, has achieved at least one DTM, which is the top level you can achieve in Toastmasters. It's called Distinguished Toastmaster. Her presentation tonight is The Art of Listening. Listening is vital. Everything speaks. We have to learn to be aware of what you are seeing as well as what you are hearing. Please welcome Rebecca Kimbel, The Art of Listening.
Thank you so much.
You.
Listening is 50% of communication. Not talking, listening. Everything speaks, or doesn't. The point that I want to make here that is so extremely valid, when you are speaking with someone, when you listen to them, you need to pay attention to their emotions, their attention span or lack of it, whether they're thinking about what you're talking about or if their mind is still on the traffic jam before they got into the building. If you don't do that, you are not communicating. If you don't hear their emotional level when it is unspoken, you are not communicating. Why is this so vital? Many of you are very aware that the reason that Toastmasters recommends so many businesses send their people to Toastmasters is to learn human behavior skills. If you don't have people skills, you're not a satisfactory business partner. Because businesses are about people if they're going to be successful. If a business doesn't have the personnel that cares to take the time to find out what their customer needs and wants, not what you want to sell them, what they need and want, that business will start declining over a period of time. Because a business that serves the needs of the people is a business that can be trusted. And if it doesn't serve the needs of the people, it will automatically start to diminish. You say, well, these are applications that apply in business. Ladies and gentlemen, these are applications that apply in life. In life. Listening is absolutely vital. There are many concepts in different cultures in our nation and other nations in the world that deal with non-listening as a habitual pattern of the culture. For example, I was talking to a friend who's 94 years young, and he was telling me how his father would grab them and spank them and use corporal punishment immediately because spare the rod and spoil the child was the concept. And as a little boy, his father taught him to fear him. He didn't teach him to listen. He didn't know the difference. He really didn't. He thought that's what a father does. When we wonder why our children don't listen, perhaps we don't know how to communicate on our half of the deal. It's very important to pay attention to that child. Are they running through the room and you grab them in midair and give them a spanking and tell them, why aren't you listening to me? Psychology has proven that when that happens, the child learns to fear you and their emotional level just goes through the sky And the last thing they're thinking about is listening. To cause a person to listen, you need to get their attention. And guess what? They still aren't going to listen unless they have a desire to listen. Will I define that? Yes. How many of you have raised teenage kids?
Yes.
You can say, I told you, and I told you, and I told you, and this can go on for a few years. And the kids shrug, yeah, you told me. But are they listening? No. Why aren't they listening? They don't see any cause to. You always say that. They don't have a motivation to listen to you. They feel no need to hear you. Life just goes on the same anyway. So how does a parent cope with that? First, let me tell you a little story about my nephew. When he was 4.5 years old, he was big for his age, and my sister and I would go into the store. And he would start begging my sister, buy me this, Mama, buy me that, buy me this, buy me that. And she would say, no. Give me this and give me that, Mom. And she would say, no. And he would get louder and more dramatic, and pretty soon he was crying, and he threw himself on the grocery store floor, and he's kicking and screaming, and she's so embarrassed that she runs over and buys him exactly what he wanted. Today, he's 6'3". He weighs 250 pounds. And he's still that little boy. He learned to embarrass his parents, and they would fork over the money, bail him out of trouble, buy him what he wanted, whatever. And my sister cries and she says, how did this happen? I was a good mom. I did everything I could to make him happy. How in the world has this happened? And she's sincere. She really means it. She has no awareness that kids are like puppies. They do what they get rewarded for. He finds a greater profit in not listening. As a matter of fact, he can make more money not listening than if he went out and got a bona fide job that really was a job. Because he's learned the art of manipulation. Manipulation has many forms in not listening. Many forms. Embarrassment and humiliation is a huge one. To be embarrassed in public, to be embarrassed on the job, to made look ridiculous, whatever, is a huge form of manipulation, and it works in society on all levels. And it is learned when you're little. Forms of manipulation are learned very, very young. If you're listening, you'll start recognizing them. If you're being manipulated, you are in a precarious position that can start going downhill. Pay attention and listen to what a person says. If they're going to embarrass you, humiliate you, blackmail you in any way to make their life better, that's not a person you want in your business, in your partnership, or as a friend, because they're not. They're going to use you. That's very common, that form of manipulation. Another form of manipulation, which is more common among females than males, but still common, is being sick. Now, all being sick is not manipulation, but it works so good that the girls just can't resist it. And you say, well, how would girls fall for that? It's real easy. Don't you guys remember the old movies where the girl said, oh, not tonight, darling, I have a headache. It works. Oh, yeah. It works, even on the old Turner Classic films. Girls aren't dumb, they learn real young. Can't do it, Mom, broke my fingernail, stubbed my toe, can't walk out there, hurt my back. Oh, got a headache, it's that time of the month. Girls are really good at that. So when you look at your children, ask yourself, am I rewarding this child for not taking responsibility of their own actions? And if you can start recognizing it in your everyday life, you're going to start recognizing it in your social life, in your work life, and in your position in the community. Pay attention to manipulation versus the real thing. Because manipulation is habitual. That doesn't mean that people that get carried away with this can't develop psychosomatic illnesses and they become real. But that's not the topic of this particular talk. The talk here is to get you to realize who's going to be responsible for their behavior and who's going to make you responsible or someone else for their behavior. That is the point that I want to illustrate here. Pay attention. And pay attention to the actions, the response in speech, all of it. Another form of not listening is to placate you, tell you anything you want to hear, and they just never get around to doing it. They just keep pushing things on they're just too busy to work in their schedule and just never, ever, ever going to get around to doing it. That, folks, is not an accident. That is manipulation. If you don't carry out the garbage and wait long enough, somebody else is going to do it.
Yes.
And they do it because it works. Now, with your children, here's what most parents don't understand. When they let this happen, they're not doing the child a favor. Because what happens is the child gets up in years, old enough to face the real world, and they keep trying to use this strategy on all of their relationships. And they're in for a real difficult life. And the reason they're in for a difficult life is because inside of that kid, they never learned to handle the consequences of the cause and effect of their own behavior. They are literally unprepared to face life. And it doesn't matter how old that body gets, if that mind didn't go through the sequences of being responsible for their own behavior, you're going to have to communicate with them on a different level and know who these people are by their behavior patterns in your business, in your friendship, and in your family. That doesn't mean you can change them. People only change when they want to change. They have to have something else that they believe in that would work better. This is where training comes in. This is why Toastmasters says, send your people to Toastmasters. Because if they don't understand that you need to communicate with each and every human being on an honesty level of feeling a need, there's no desire to change. You need to point out the value of changing behavior patterns. Not by condemnation, not by putting them down or degrading them, but by teaching them a better way. And I mean really teaching them a better way. If a farm boy comes in and he knows how to drive all the big equipment in the world and he knows nothing about business, he has an inner motivation to want to know. If he's working for you, maybe he doesn't. Pay attention to who's paying attention. People will listen if they find value in what you are saying. Your children will listen when they find value in what you are saying. When they understand, look baby, one of these days, Mom and Dad aren't going to be here anymore, and you'll be on your own. What will happen then? Well, they could go out and create a lot of havoc and a riot, and maybe hope society would pay them. There's a lot of kids doing that. But let's get realistic before it ever gets that bad. And teach those kids that they have a value. This is phase 2. It's your job as a listener to help that person find out what they need and what they value. Every human being has value, and we're not all alike. We're not all alike. I can define that very well by telling you a little story. My big brother told me when I was just a kid. He told me a lot of little gems, but this one really stuck. He said, Becky, when the old master painter made us, he dealt this great deck of cards. But before he dealt it, he shuffled it. And he dealt us each a hand. Now, sis, remember this. Every hand is different. Nobody's got the same hand. The only cards they can play in life is the hand that they were dealt. And they got to play it to the very best of their ability, or their life will be difficult. He said, but the important thing for you to remember is none of us are playing with a full deck. I never forgot that. So don't judge the other guy by your hand, nor you by his. Find out what's important to him, what he cares about, what he needs. And communicate with him where he is and not where you want him to be. Judging him and criticizing him will not make him want to deal with you. Approach every human being, no matter how young or old, educated or uneducated, or where they're from anywhere on this earth. Approach every human being with human compassion on their level. Your job as a Toastmaster is leadership. Leadership. Not punishment. Not judgment. Leadership. We instinctively follow those who inspire us. We instinctively give our dedication to people that care about us. People will instinctively bring their business to a person, a company, a group they trust that cares about them. It's been said so many times, a trustworthy business has no competition. Because the biggest difference you're ever going to make is not what you accumulated. It will be the effect you had on the lives you touched as you walked through this life. That will be your legacy. Every human being has the same basic needs. Every human being wants to be cared for and cared about and treated with integrity. Every human being wants safety. Every human being wants their children safe. An opportunity to live in peace. An opportunity to live and grow in education. These are basic human needs, and we are human. And when we are not humane, we are not communicating. Basic human needs exist in all of humanity. Every person has a value. It's very important, if you communicate with them, to help them find that value. How do we do that? We do it by listening. Listening. If a person looks down and is afraid to look up at you, they're not listening. If they look you in the eye and lie, they're not listening. You can tell if you're emotionally present. Emotionally present. Awareness. Keep your awareness level high. Try to start making it a habit to be aware when you're around people. Aware of the things they do, aware of the things that they don't do. You say, what's that got to do with Toastmasters? Everything. Everything. I'll give you the perfect example. Your award-winning speech in New York City, where you got a standing ovation, probably will not even get any more than a grunt in cattle country in Colorado. Pay attention to who you're talking to. That doesn't make the cattlemen any less than the guys in New York. But it makes him feel like you don't understand his world, his needs, and where he's coming from, and he's not going to hear you. He's not going to hear you. Smart businessmen that do work teaching business in cattle country in Colorado buy themselves a pair of Tony Lama boots and a Western jacket before going in. You can make concessions if you really want to reach somebody. If they can't identify with you, they feel that you can't identify with them. It is not your job to be greater than, more important than, or smarter than they are. It is your job to communicate with them and to provide for them honest leadership. Leadership will change their lives. Leadership will change the other lives that it touches. Leadership comes from your heartfelt instinct, not a threat. Not a threat. If you're going to talk to someone and you're going to say, if you don't do as I say for you to do, you're going to get a spanking, you're going to lose your job, you have to get out of the community because nobody thinks like you do. You might think that's silly, but we have a lot of organizations, families, and communities that ostracize people if they don't think like they do. Now tell me, ladies and gentlemen, how important is a person if they think exactly like you do? If two people think exactly alike, come on, one of them's unnecessary. It is literally by our differences that we expand, that we grow, that we create bridges, that we create a bigger, better world. Not by our similarities. Vive la difference, as the Frenchman says. Love the difference. Learn from it. Enjoy it. Expand it. Cross those bridges. We live in a world based primarily on money. Perhaps as we expand our consciousness and our caring and our humanitarian qualities, we can live in a world that cares about the life in the world, the people, all the life forms, and the planet. What a different world that would be if we stopped sinking millions of dollars into wars and started turning it into a conscious endeavor to create a better world. And each and every one of us, no matter how small you think your part is, affects every single life you touch. And what I'm asking of you today is, please, ladies and gentlemen, touch those lives consciously, deliberately, not accidentally, but with forethought and willful intent. Listen to the joy or pain or sorrow or desire or excitement in front of you. Listen. Embrace it. Deal with it. Uplift it. And help them to make their better life. And I want to thank each and every one of you here today, because you're a Toastmaster. And you have no idea yet, how many lives you're going to change, how many businesses will flourish, how many families will flourish, and how many good things will come from the simple act of your taking on a role of leadership with your heart, your mind, and your ears before you even touch it with your voice. This is your personal challenge, but I promise you it will be very, very, very rewarding. It will be. There'll come a day when somebody will walk up and shake your hand and say, "You don't know me, but you changed my life." And it will happen. So remember, listening is 50% of communication. Listening is more than just auditory, it's visual. Actions speak louder than words. Very important key to remember. Very important. I thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight and for listening to me.